huge issue, and the deficit is so large, the deficit that the Liberals are going to be leaving for future generations, I'm very concerned for the future of my children and for the future of all Canadians, young Canadians, because we know that one day interest rates are going to go up, and that's when we're going to have to pay back the bill, pay this money back. It will be very large amounts, and it will cost a lot of jobs in Canada.
Déclaration de député, l'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Thank you, Madam Speaker. For a year now, I've had the honour of being the member for Laurentides-Labelle. Our region is full of beautiful landscapes, events, and tourist attractions in an area that covers 20,000 square kilometres. In other words, 40 times the size of the island of Montreal. We're renowned for our ski hills, our 9 regional and national parks, our controlled harvesting zones, our 2 wildlife reserves, thousands of lakes and rivers, and thousands of trails for biking, hiking, snowmobiling, and snowshoeing. But our region is mostly known for the quality of our people and our communities and the dynamic service of our tourism industry workers. Because this week is Small Business Week, I would like to highlight the work of everyone who works in our tourist industry, which, as Curé-Labelle said, is a little piece of Switzerland in Canada. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honour member for Edmonton Manning.
Madam Speaker, as I reflect on the first anniversary of my election as Member of Parliament for Edmonton Manning, I want to pay tribute to Paul Sitinsky. Before last year's vote, he tirelessly distributed campaign literature to rural areas of the riding, making sure everyone heard the message. Paul is an example of the countless volunteers who are the lifeblood of political campaigns and the backbone of democracy in our great nation. In every riding across the country, every campaign, every party, there are many Paul Sitinskys. There are the unsung heroes of political life. We in this House know how politics is a team effort, the work of dedicated Canadians who give of their time and talent for the good of the country. Let us salute volunteers like Paul Sitinsky. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Honoré-Mercier. Madam Speaker, October is Latin American History and Heritage Month. Latin American history is rich in culture and traditions. It is as diverse as the many countries that make it up. It gave birth to many civilizations and peoples, including the Mosquitos, the Mapuches, the Incas, the Mayas, and the Aztecs. Then there was the Spanish conquest, the conquistadors, the wars of liberation, and the creation of independent states. Over decades, through highs and lows, the countries of Latin America developed. They developed their own identities, and they influenced the entire world with their music, salsa, merengue, rumba, and tango. They influenced literature with Jorge Luis Borges, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Pablo Neruda. They influenced sport with Maradona, Pelé, and Lionel Messi. Madam Speaker, today more than ever, Latin America is a truly dynamic culture.
America Latina.
The honour member for Skeena-Balkley Valley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Thursday, a tanker barge ran aground and sank near Bella Bella on BC's central coast, spilling tens of thousands of litres of toxic diesel into critical fishing areas of the HoC Nation. I rise to pay tribute to the courageous HoC who have been out on the water day and night since this tragic spill to protect their home. Local councillor Jesse Husty said, and I quote, "We know there are people who have had headaches, irritation in their noses and lungs since day one. They're not reporting them because they don't want to be told that they can't go out and help anymore. They can't imagine being anywhere else." The federal government didn't arrive on the scene for almost 24 hours after the spill, and since then a second spill response vessel has also run aground and now sunk. And diesel continues to leak, causing more devastation. This is not a world-class spill response. This is a betrayal and a dereliction of duty. The Prime Minister made a sacred promise to First Nations in British Columbia and the people in my riding that he would protect our coast. Yet when he was asked point blank earlier this week whether he would stay true to his word, he deflected and suggested that opening a Coast Guard station 600 kilometers away was good enough. We will protect what must be protected.
For Glengarry Prescott Russell.
Madam Speaker, I rise to recognize a brave and courageous young man, Jonathan Pitt,
who suffers from a severe form of EB, a terrible disease that causes irritation and red blisters. Having this disease, according to doctors, is like being a burn victim your whole life. Madam Speaker, does this bring Jonathan down? Absolutely not. When asked by the Ottawa Citizen, Jonathan said, "Of course I'm not happy to have this, but at the same time, I kind of am because I prefer it being me than somebody else." At 16 years of age, he's already a noble man. But Madam Speaker, his selfless kindness doesn't stop there. He's an ambassador for Deborah Canada. Over the last month, Jonathan has been undergoing a stem cell transplant in Minnesota. It didn't work, but doctors are optimistic that the second stem cell transplant will work. Jonathan, you are an inspiration for all of us. Your community will walk for you on November 19th, and I know my colleagues will agree with me. We are all with you as you undergo your second treatment. Be strong, and we look forward to seeing you back in Russell. Thank you.
The honourable member for Whitby. The honourable member for Whitby.
Madame la Présidente, je prends...
Madam Speaker, I rise to speak today to mention the work of Wounded Warriors Canada in my riding of Whitby. All across the country, we recognize their service to veterans, to armed forces workers, and to wounded first aid workers. Wounded Warriors organized a run, or rather a bike, with more than 200 cyclists.
Ill and injured veterans. Many of us participated in the 22 Push-Up Challenge, which raised funds and awareness for wounded warriors. On behalf of the organization and the people it serves, thank you and happy anniversary to Phil Ralph.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Almost a year ago, I was welcomed in Ottawa by a fantastic team who allowed me and my colleagues to devote ourselves 100% to our duties as MPs. I'm talking about the Sergeant-at-Arms and his team, the constables who remember all of our faces, the RCMP agents who are always there to protect us, the researchers and analysts who always give us all the facts, the parliamentary guides who know the history of this place, the interpreters who allow my Anglophone colleagues to understand my excellent speeches, and all of the people who work for the standing committees and parliamentary associations, as well as all of those who serve us food every day in the cafeteria and restaurant, the shuttle drivers who always have a smile, the clerk of the House and his team, and all the others who work in the shadows. And finally, the pages who are always there to help us with the slightest task. How many young people do you know who dream of listening to MPs speechifying for hours on end? With such a fantastic team, it's easy to be brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for your support.
L'honorable député Prairie.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Madam Speaker, last Sunday was the 36th anniversary of World Food Day. I'd like to take this opportunity to raise awareness about poverty and hunger. Too many people suffer from malnutrition or have an insufficient calorie intake. In Canada, 1 child out of every 6 children suffers from food insecurity. With the Canada Child Benefit, Budget 2016 helped lift 300,000 children out of poverty. This is a step in the right direction, along with many other measures put forward by other stakeholders. For example, there are community organizations like Complexe Le Partage de la Prairie, which are helping alleviate food insecurity for millions of people. In the coming months, Madam Speaker, I will be working with my colleague, the Minister of Agriculture, and a series of other stakeholders to develop a totally new food policy, which will help more Canadian families put healthier, more high-quality food on the table. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Peace River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Carbon tax man, let us be. We can't afford this onerous fee. 11 cents more for a liter of fuel, taxing me and my kids' school. Farms and families will feel the pinch when the carbon tax man pulls the cinch. Tax the tractor, combine, plow, tax the chicken, egg, and cow. Tax the fuel that heats the barn, tax the power that runs the farm. Add it up, right. Liberals, you'll like the stash when the carbon tax man grabs our cash. Right. Tax the Kenworth logging trucks, tax the chainsaw tops and butts. Tax the backbone of industry and watch our companies become history. The Liberals want to take it all, the carbon tax man will have a ball. Thousands of dollars from you and me, shipping costs on clothes and tea. Earning a wage is not so fab when it's taken away in a massive tax grab. Carbon tax man, enough's enough. Don't tax Canadians and all their stuff.
The honourable member for Ottawa West, Nepean.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. During World War II, Canada provided refuge to the Dutch royal family. When Princess Juliana gave birth to her daughter Marguerite, the maternity ward of the Ottawa Civic Hospital was even briefly declared international territory. Every year since then, the Dutch have gifted our capital with tulips, which now hold a special place in the Canadian imagination. Pour souligner le
To mark Canada's 150th anniversary, the Canadian Garden Council is giving red and white tulip bulbs to 150 gardens across the country, including the Embassy West Senior Centre in my riding. I would like to thank the Council for helping ensure that this moment of exceptional humanity in Canada's history will be celebrated as part of our 150th anniversary celebrations.
Feliciteerd.
The honourable member for Oakville.
Madam Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to recognize the 150th anniversary of military service of the Lawrence Scots Regiment. We celebrated them in my riding of Oakville with the unveiling of a monument recognizing their battle honours and regimental insignia. From fighting on the Queenston Heights in Niagara to most recently the International Security Assistance Force in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, the Lawrence Scots have recruited, trained and generated soldiers for every theatre of war in which Canada has engaged. The regiment has also supported Canada's numerous contributions to international peace and security through the UN and NATO. As we commemorate the 150th regimental anniversary, I ask the House to honour the brave young men and women of the Lawrence Scots Regiment who have so selflessly dedicated themselves, and lest we forget the many who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in their service to Canada. May the Lawrence Scots long continue. Er son a duchesse.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in the House to pay tribute to an inspiring Albertan and a close friend, Sheldon Kennedy, who received Alberta's highest award, the Order of Excellence, on Wednesday. Sheldon showed incredible courage to break a long-standing silence in sports with his story of childhood sexual abuse, and now he's a tireless advocate for other victims. He suffered for many years under the burden of this secret, and a secret he was afraid to share. When he did share his personal story, many other victims, inspired by Sheldon's strength, came forward, and their stories inspired Sheldon to take action. He established Respect Group to help prevent abuse, bullying, harassment in sports, school, and the workplace. In 2013, the renowned Sheldon Kennedy Child Advocacy Centre opened in Calgary to help those affected by abuse. Madam Speaker, I am proud to know this compassionate, inspiring man who speaks around the world raising awareness about sexual abuse and the impact on victims, and I am proudly honoured to call him a friend. I invite all members in this House to congratulate Sheldon on his award and thank him for his advocacy.
The honourable member for Ottawa South.
Madam Speaker, 2 years ago, a few hundred meters from here, a mother lost a son lost a father, and an entire nation mourned the loss of a dedicated soldier. On October 22, 2014, Corporal Nathan Cirillo stood guard at the monument to the brave women and men who came before him, to those who made the ultimate sacrifice to protect our freedom. Le Caporal Cirillo était l'un des...
Corporal Cirillo was a beautiful example of what the Canadian Armed Forces can represent. He was full of humility, and he served a nation that is appreciative of his actions.
Of those that choose to watch over us, thankful for their sacrifice, and resolute in our commitment to continue fighting for a world free of fear of injustice and oppression. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
The honourable member for Victoria.
Speaker, for 21 years, the Community Action Program for Children has supported local initiatives to help at-risk children and their families. In Victoria, this federal funding allows community centres to offer children's activities for free and helps parents access services and support. Often these families are low income, they're single parents, new immigrants, or have Indigenous ancestry. All of them want to build a better, healthier life for their children. But with funding flat for a decade and the need constantly rising, programs are falling behind. Kids in Victoria are literally being turned away at the door. I would like to impress upon this House the tremendous value that federal CAPC funding brings to all our communities. I hope we can work together to strengthen it for the parents and kids who count on it.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Madam Speaker, yesterday marked the second anniversary of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent's murder by an Islamic extremist in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. And it will be 2 years ago tomorrow that Corporal Nathan Cirillo was killed as he stood guard at the National War Memorial here in Ottawa. On the anniversary of these tragic events, I pay tribute to these two brave men for their sacrifice, and I extend my sincere gratitude to their families. Last year, the Conservative government initiated a large ceremony at the National War Memorial to mark the first anniversary of the attack. The event included a speech by the Governor-General, a military march past by Cirillo's Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, a CF-18 flypast in missing man formation to honour Warrant Officer Vincent, and the unveiling of a permanent plaque commemorating Cirillo at the site. They were remembered, Madam Speaker, yet this year there's no commemoration, no event, and no honour is being paid to these fallen heroes by the government. I think I can safely say on behalf of all veterans and all Canadians, Madam Speaker, to say that we are deeply saddened by this.
Questions orales, oral question. Oh, sorry, I forgot. There's one more. The honourable member for Hall-Elmer. L'honorable député.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With the support of 71 other UN countries, Canada spearheaded diplomatic pressure on the UN Security Council to break their inaction in dealing with the Syria crisis. Canada stepped up when leadership was needed. But what laid the groundwork? Ce qui a produit cette action, Madame la Présidente.
What laid the groundwork for this, Madam Speaker, was the incredible work of Canada's ambassador to the UN, Marc-André Blanchard. He managed to rally these countries toward a common cause.
Madam Speaker, we get a window into the world occupied by our tireless diplomats and civil servants. Every day, Canada and Canadians are representing our interests, take a stand for our principles and for what is right. They assert our voice at critical global tables and fora to make a difference. All Canadians and every member in this House, I'm certain, will join me in thanking our tireless work from our civil servants and our diplomats in making sure that Canada has its place.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Trade agreement is a historic agreement. It took years to negotiate, and it was the Conservatives who got the hard part done. We negotiated a deal that will benefit Canadian families and businesses in every sector of the country. Now the Liberal government is struggling with what should be the easy part, putting a final signature on the deal we delivered. When will the Prime Minister pick up the drop ball from his Trade Minister and get the job done for Canadians?
The
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank the Honourable Member for her question. I would remind her that this deal was dead when we took over office, and it's only because of the progressive elements that we added to the agreement, Mr. Speaker, that we have come this far. We have worked hard to respond to the concerns expressed by European member states, but we're disappointed, Madam Speaker. The Minister's personally disappointed. I'm disappointed after all that hard work that the Europeans have been unable to make a decision. Even though we share similar values, even though we have been extremely patient, even though we've been flexible, there is no agreement yet on the table.
Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
It's a failure on the part of the Liberal government, and they're going to wear it. Mr. Speaker, while the Finance Minister provides special cash for access treatment for his elite Liberal friends, ordinary Canadians are worried. Now more than ever, Canadians are concerned about how they will maintain their own family's budget. Yet the finance minister is planning to blow past his targets and add billions more to the deficit, a deficit that will have to be paid for by Canadians. When will the Liberals get control of their reckless spending and stop damaging our economy?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we were so pleased recently to host the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, who said that she hopes that our policies go viral around the world. And the reason for that, Madam Speaker, is because she understands that making fiscal investments in the long-term future of our country is absolutely the right thing to do in a time of low growth. That's what we're going to do to make our economy better for the long term, for Canadian families, for all those people who need to have growth, for their families to have opportunities in the future.
The Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, the minister can keep on with that fantasy, but it's not working. In fact, out-of-control Liberal spending, a slipping Canadian economy, and a downgraded Bank of Canada forecast could add billions to the federal deficit. What's the Liberal solution? More taxes on Canadians. Whether it's the payroll tax grab, a carbon tax, or increased taxes on small businesses, the only plan the Liberals seem to have is to punish Canadians with more taxes. Right. When will the Liberals stop helping themselves and start helping Canadians?
Yes. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I guess I'd like to start by just quoting the April Monetary Policy Report, which said, measures in Budget 2016 will have a notable positive impact in 2016. So what we're talking about, Madam Speaker, is how we can actually deal with the low-growth environment that's been around for a decade, around for the decade that the previous government was sitting in office. We're taking action to actually make a long-term difference for Canadians. We are doing the things that people expect us to do so their children and grandchildren will have a better Canada.
The
Honourable Member for Richmond, Athabasca. Madam Speaker, today our thoughts are with the families that are affected by the 7,000 families that are affected by the layoffs at Bombardier. 2,000 of those families are in Canada. For a year, the Liberals have been talking about spending, and they are creating a huge deficit on the backs of our children. Can the government not invest to create jobs? When will they produce a plan to create wealth?
Finance and the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madame la Présidente, c'est exact.
Madam Speaker, this is exactly what we have done. We decided to have a plan to drive economic growth in our country, and that was in part of the budget in 2016. It was the priority. We have to make up for what wasn't done over the past decade. We've made investments for the middle class, for our children and grandchildren. This is exactly what we are doing. Honourable Member for Richmond, Athabasca. Well, the minister's talking about this, but there are two major banking institutions that are asking for these deficit measures to stop. When it comes to Bombardier, there have been requests, but the Liberals early on put an end to the plans for the Billy Bishop Airport that would have helped Bombardier. The fact is that there is no plan for the economy, for economic growth, or for job creation. Does the Minister of Finance not realize that this is a dead-end policy and it will not create jobs? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, it is absolutely the case that we understand it is important to have good jobs for Canadians. This is a very key goal for our government, and this is exactly why we decided the measures that were proposed by the former government did not go far enough. We've decided to invest in the future, in infrastructure, for example, in an economy that will be more innovative. And this will create more jobs for Canadians.
De Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. We learned this morning that Bombardier was going to cut 7,500 jobs, including 1,500 in Quebec, and that comes on top of the restructuring that was already announced earlier this year. The government promised to invest in this pillar of the Quebec economy, but the help has not been forthcoming. The government has has abandoned the Avios employees and must not do the same thing for Bombardier. When will it act?
Science and economic development.
Madam Speaker, first and foremost, our thoughts go out to the workers and their families during this difficult time. We as a government understand the challenges that they're going through. With respect to Bombardier, we've been very clear, we've been very engaged with this company, and we understand the importance of this company in the aerospace sector. And we've said very clearly it's not a matter of if, but how we want to make this investment. And I spoke with the CEO and president last night, Alain. He made it very clear as well that these restructuring job losses are independent, have nothing to do with the growth discussions we're having with respect to the billion-dollar request that they made.
The honourable member for Victoria.
2,000, Madam Speaker. That's the number of Canadians that are about to lose their job because of this government's inaction. Workers at Bombardier have been waiting a long time for this government to make good on its investment promise. And what have they actually received to date? Nothing. Companies around the world are global giants today because their home governments invest in them. Does this government understand that, and will they finally deliver their investment promise needed to keep good-paying jobs at Bombardier here in Canada?
Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development.
Madam Speaker, I think the member opposite should recall the announcement that we made last week. We committed $54 million to Bombardier and its suppliers to further invest in research and development. So we are committed to the aerospace sector. We made investments in Mirabel as well. We're committed to this sector because it's so critical for our economy. It contributes $28 billion of economic activity, employs over 200,000 employees. And we made it very, very clear this is a serious request that we take very importantly, and we're going to find a solution, but we want to make sure it's the right solution for taxpayers to make sure we get a right return on investment.
The honourable member for Victoria.
So more words, less action, less jobs. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's ethics rules were very clear. I want to quote, "There should be no preferential access to government or the appearance of preferential access for political donors." But now it's clear those were just empty words. Ministers don't follow them, and the Prime Minister won't enforce them. So the question is simple. Will this government turn that empty promise of good intentions into actual rules that are enforced?
Very good.
The honourable government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's important to note all members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules that were put in place by the previous government. Events like these are one part of every party's fundraising and engagement work. Federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country, and the party fully complies with the Elections Act in all cases, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister already also wrote that ministers have an obligation to perform their official duties and arrange their private affairs in a manner that will bear the closest public scrutiny. And he also said that the obligation is not fully discharged merely by acting within the law. The rules seem very clear. The Minister of Finance says that he was acting within the law. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to enforce his own rules with his cabinet?
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, if it's the same question, you will get the same answer. And the same answer is, quite frankly, all members of Parliament and all parties fundraise. We know that, Madam Speaker. And we all abide by the same rules, Madam Speaker. Rules that were put in place by the previous Harper government, Madam Speaker. The party is in full compliance with the Elections Act. The member knows that, Madam Speaker.
The
honourable member for Carleton.
The Liberal budget admitted the deficit would be more than twice what they promised during the election. Now the finance minister says it will be bigger still because economic growth is down. But wait, weren't we told that big deficits would solve that problem? Madam Speaker, if deficits created growth, our economy would be roaring right now. Instead, it's stalled. When will the finance minister realize that spending money we don't have is not the solution, It's the problem.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, we came into office with stalled growth from the previous government. That was exactly what we faced and what Canadians decided was a problem, and that's why they agreed with us that the right way to address this is to make significant investments in Canadians today and tomorrow. So the kinds of measures we put in place, the Canada Child Benefit, those measures are having an impact now. They're starting to be put into the economy. The infrastructure investments that we put in place, they're starting to come into the economy now. We know that we are going to make a long-term difference from Canadians by taking the right decisions for their future.
Member for Carleton.
Well, the Prime Minister has unveiled his plan for creating jobs in Beverly Hills and Hollywood. He put the premiers in charge of implementing his new $39 billion carbon tax. Kathleen Wynne plans to spend $300 million of it buying carbon credits from California. So the middle class and those working to join it will pay more in food, fuel, and everything else to send a pot of gold to the Golden State. Why are the Liberals forcing Ontarians and Canadians to pay for their California dreaming?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question. We are the only party that seems to understand the environment and the economy go together. That's right. We are committed to taking serious action on climate change. We were very proud 2 weeks ago that we were able to ratify the Paris Agreement. Unfortunately, the party opposite did not support that. We are working with the provinces and territories to have a plan, a pan-Canadian plan that will make a real difference, that will create good jobs and will build a clean economy for future generations, for my children, for your children, and for our grandchildren.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Confederation.
Madam Speaker, it is no secret the Alberta economy is suffering. Albertans are suffering. There is growing frustration. The Liberals have given up even trying to help. The evidence is clear. It has been 1 year since the Liberals promised sunny ways. In that time, Calgary's unemployment rate has grown by 36%, higher than the national average. The Liberals keep hiking taxes and making things worse. Madam Speaker, why are the Liberals kicking Calgarians when they're already down?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, we take very seriously the challenges facing people in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador. We know that resource prices are hitting that province hard. We have made a number of decisions that are making a difference for people in Alberta and across the country. Tax decreases that are helping them. Canada Child Benefit, which helps 9 out of 10 families with more money in their pockets. And changes to our employment insurance system that make a difference in softening the landing. On the long term, we are making investments that are going to help to grow our economy and grow the economy of Alberta.
The Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Madam Speaker, this week is Small Business Week in Canada. One small business in my riding, which services oil rigs, contributes $340,000 yearly to the local economy in fuel. With their fleet of 20 trucks and the Liberal carbon tax, this business will pay an additional $29,000 annually to fuel alone. The carbon tax is roughly the cost of employing 1 to 2 shop hands, or 1 mechanic, or 1 laborer. Why are the Liberals forcing a carbon tax that will hurt the struggling oil economy and oil and gas industry even further?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister
Thank my honourable colleague for the question, and while our hearts go out to those in the oil fields, I'd like to make one point that this government does understand small business. We made a huge investment in Destination Canada this year, because small business operators tell us that they want customers. And I'm pleased to report that Destination Canada says that tourism is up by 10%, over 10% for June, July, and August. It's the best summer we've had since 2002. Small business operators wanted more customers, and that's what we've given them, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sarnia Lambton.
Yeah, well, raising taxes on small business isn't going to help them. Madam Speaker, the Liberals promised their $10 billion deficit would go towards infrastructure spending to create jobs. But 110,000 Canadians have lost their jobs across the country, and this Liberal deficit continues to grow. Meanwhile, there seems to be a new tax every day. The Liberals hiked taxes on small business, and they continue to hike taxes on everyday Canadians. When will the millionaire finance minister stop his war on the middle class?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, we know that providing jobs for middle-class Canadians, providing opportunities for those who want to get in the middle class, these are critical issues that Canadians are worried about. And that is exactly why we did the opposite of what the member said. We lowered taxes on middle-class Canadians because we know that they want to see the benefits from our economy for them. We know that the Canada Child Benefit helps all Canadians with children, 9 out of 10 families, with $2,300 on average more. This is important for middle-class Canadians and will make a real difference.
The honourable member for Lambton-Kent, Middlesex.
Madam Speaker, for 197 years, the Arva Flour Mill has a perfect safety record. This week is Small Business Week, but this small business won't have anything to celebrate if the Labour Minister doesn't grant an exemption from the Federal Labour Code. It's been months since I've asked the Minister for action and still no contact with the mill from her or her office. Is it the plan of the Minister to let the small mill die a slow death? The Minister has the authority to exempt it. Will the Minister do her job and keep...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment, Workforce and Development.
Madam Speaker, as the member well knows, the Canada Labour Code requires employers to implement preventative measures to ensure employees are not exposed to conditions. A danger directive was issued back in May to Avra Flour. The Labour Program's health and safety officers are working with the employer to ensure compliance with the code. It would be inappropriate for myself or the Minister to speak any more about the matter.
Member for London Fanshawe.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals are once again supporting Conservative policies in our courts. First, they took veterans to court regarding promised pensions, and now this government is denying expat Canadians the right to vote. Something, I might add, just like pensions for veterans, they promised to change. Madam Speaker, when will the Liberals keep their promises and stop recycling tired Conservative policies, the same policies they campaigned against only a year ago?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, it is a great privilege to be here on this traditional Algonquin territory. As a government, we are firmly committed to enhancing Canadians' participation in our democratic institutions, and we believe that more Canadians ought to be able to vote. We are currently examining the law as it relates to long-term non-resident Canadians who wish to vote in federal elections. We intend to introduce legislation this year that will meet the needs of highly mobile Canadian citizens who live in today's increasingly interconnected world.
Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, in the last campaign, just a year ago, Liberals promised to stop the terrible Conservative plan to strip Canadians overseas of their sacred right to vote. But yesterday, in court, we learned the Liberals are actually continuing the Conservatives' fight at the Supreme Court of Canada against Canadians living abroad. And the Liberal Party had the audacity to hit these very same Canadians up for a donation during the campaign. Someone once said a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, and I agree. So why would the Liberals take up Stephen Harper's scheme to rob 1.5 million Canadians of their right to vote?
Honourable Minister of Democratic Reform.
Madam Speaker, it's always great when the member opposite and I agree. The 1.2 million Canadians who live abroad and who wish to be part of our democratic institutions and participate in the voting process, we've heard them. As I mentioned, we are currently examining legislation to find ways to allow individuals who live abroad in this highly globalized world to be part of our elections, and look forward to working with the member opposite since we agree to that end.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Finance recently attended a Cash for Access fundraiser. The Liberal House Leader has repeated ad nauseum that this was within the rules. But the Prime Minister's document, Open and Accountable Government, says ministers, quote, have an obligation to perform their official duties and arrange their private affairs in a manner that will bear the closest public scrutiny. This obligation is not fully discharged merely by acting within the law. So when will the Prime Minister start enforcing his own code of ethics?
Yeah. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Honourable House Leader, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And if I may, just to repeat, all members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules. rules that were put in place by the previous Harper government. Madam Speaker, events like these are one part of every party's fundraising and engagement work. Federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country, and the party fully complies with the Elections Act in all cases, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, give him another chance. Both the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister held Cash for Access fundraisers in obvious violation of the Prime Minister's Code of Ethics. They claim that they're complying with the Ethics Commissioner, yet the Commissioner told the Globe and Mail that she can't tell whether the rules were breached because the Prime Minister gave that power to the Privy Council Office. Well, who does the Privy Council Office answer to? Guess who? The Prime Minister. Is this what he calls open and accountable government? When will the Prime Minister actually start being transparent with Canadians?
The honourable House Leader of the Government.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules. Rules that were put in place by the previous government, rules that many members sitting on the side of the House, the other side of the House, use to fundraise for the Conservative Party. I'd like to remind the members opposite that on July the 9th of this year, just 3 short months ago, the Leader of the Opposition, along with the former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, held a barbecue fundraiser in Calgary, and they charged a whopping $2,000 per table. I don't know about you, Madam Speaker, but I've never been to a barbecue where you have to buy a table. Clearly, Madam Speaker,
the honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That was a constituency association event, and Madam Speaker, it looks like the Prime Minister is picking up right where Kathleen Wynne left off. This should be no surprise to anyone, considering Jerry Butts created the Liberal Cash for Access fundraising scheme in Ontario. The Prime Minister himself instructed ministers that there shall be no preferential access to government in exchange for partisan political donations from the Liberal elites. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister needs to keep his word. Why can't the Prime Minister and his ministers see that using their government positions to line the pockets of their party?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, again, I'd like to be able to remind members opposite that on July the 9th of this year, just 3 short months ago, the Leader of the Opposition, along with the former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, held a barbecue fundraiser in Calgary, and they charged a whopping $2,000 a table, Madam Speaker. We all understand that rules that many members sitting on that side of the House...
Order. I just want to remind members, when someone has the floor, that we give them the respect that he deserves, and that, as you know, that is in the orders. Order. That's right. Somebody might lose a question. So I just want to give the member a chance to finish.
Madam Speaker, it's important that we realize all members of Parliament and all party fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules as demonstrated by the Leader of the Opposition.
The honourable member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Madam Speaker, we know well that the Liberals have a fairly elastic ethics now. They spent 10 years in purgatory, but they learned absolutely nothing. We learned that the Minister of Finance sold access to rich people at a cost of $1,500 a person. Will the government be transparent? Will the minister tell us who was there, please? The Honourable Minister for Fisheries and Oceans. Madam Speaker, we don't really understand what the Conservatives are trying to teach us about fundraising. The former member for Labrador had to resign over a fundraising scandal. And we know that the parliamentary secretary to the assistant to the Prime Minister had to resign over these types of scandals, so there's no justification to their criticism.
Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Canada needs a national action plan on abandoned vessels. They pose terrible risks to our economy and our environment. But this government's ship-by-ship approach is too slow and too expensive. At the rate we're moving, it'll take a century to clean up the 600 abandoned vessels littering Canada's coast. BC's had dozens of motions of good intention. Do we really need another? When will this government deal with a clear action plan and table it in this House to once and for all deal with abandoned vessels in Canada?
Madam Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for the question. We share her concern about these derelict and abandoned vessels that are, frankly, on every coast of the country and including in some of the lakes. It is a problem that our government has committed to rectify, and the Minister of Transport and I have been working with a number of stakeholders, and I know that she's excited about the plan that we'll be tabling. And the good news, Madam Speaker, for all members of the House, is that plan is coming very, very soon.
The honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Madam Speaker, last week a tanker barge ran aground off BC's north coast, spilling 200,000 litres of toxic fuel into a sensitive area. After a slow response, one of the ships helping with the cleanup also began to sink. And this is what the minister calls a world-class response? This relatively minor incident still caused major damage. If it had been a fully loaded supertanker, the devastation would have been off the charts. So when will this government finally implement a permanent ban off BC's north coast?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government remains committed to improving marine safety in Canada and ensuring the protection of our marine environment. The Nathan E. Stewart incident underlines the need for changes in these incidents, and that is why the Minister is currently working on a coastal strategy to enhance marine safety in a meaningful way. He has named a Minister's Observer to support the Transportation Safety Board's investigation, and transport officials have initiated a compliance inspection. We will take the necessary action on the findings to enhance marine safety in Canada.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox, Addington.
Madam Speaker, on June 17th, the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development tabled a unanimous report with recommendations on the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy and accompanying legislation. That this report received unanimous support from all three parties is a testament to Canadians' desire to take the necessary steps to create a more sustainable future. Earlier this month, our government tabled our first Federal Sustainable Development Strategy. Madam Speaker, can the Minister of Environment advise this House as to the progress our government has made on updating the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
I'd like to thank the member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington for his great question. Our government is committed to protecting the environment and working towards a clean growth strategy that benefits the middle class and creates good jobs. Canadians want ambitious action on climate change. They want more leadership from government. They strongly support sustainable development and are motivated to make a difference. I want to thank the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development for the hard work and all the input that we received from Canadians across the country. This Federal Sustainable Development Strategy will make a real difference to building a more sustainable world for our children and grandchildren.
Honourable member for Niagara Falls.
Madam Speaker, for years, Canadian police officers have worked hard and served with distinction on the Federal Judicial Advisory Committee. Now, what an insult now that for no reason the Liberal government has terminated their membership on this committee. I want to know, why would the Prime Minister show such disrespect for those who risk their lives every day to serve and protect Canadians? I'd like to know that.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, Madam Speaker, I appreciate the question, and it gives me the opportunity to highlight the 24 judicial appointments that we made across the country yesterday, and to highlight the renewed process to ensure openness and transparency with respect to the new appointments process. We have reconstituted the judicial advisory committees with the intent to ensure that there is diversity among the members of the committees, but to ultimately ensure that we achieve diversity on the benches across this country to reflect Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, police officers in Canada have worked hard and served well on the Judicial Advisory Committee. It's an insult that their participation has been terminated. Madam Speaker, why is the Minister of Justice showing such disrespect for the people who risk their lives day in and day out to serve and protect Canadians?
Minister de Justice.
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And certainly there is no disrespect being shown to law enforcement officers who risk their lives every day to protect our safety. What we have done is institute an open and transparent process for judicial appointments and unprecedentedly put online application forms wherein anybody can apply to be on the Judicial Advisories Committee. I look forward to, as the Minister of Justice, being able to nominate 3 members of that committee as we seek to ensure that we have broad-based diversity on the committees, as well as future appointments for Superior Court judges.
The honourable member for York Simcoe.
October 22nd marks 2 years since a jihadist terrorist struck at the heart of our freedom and democracy. Corporal Nathan Cirillo was brutally gunned down just steps from here. The thickness of a door and brave actions of our Hill security staff saved members here a similar fate. It was 2 days after a jihadist murdered Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent. Last year, our government honoured the sacrifice of these men, but this year, the Liberals want Canadians to forget. There will be no memorial. Why are the Liberals dishonouring these fallen men and trying to pretend that these jihadist attacks never happened?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence.
All of Canada remembers the tragic events on October 20th and 22nd of 2014. We mourn the passing of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent and Corporal Nathan Cirillo and extend our sympathies to their families. It is at events in Ottawa on November 11th and others across Canada and the world where we will join together as a nation and as a people to recognize and pay tribute to all those brave Canadian soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice in wartime and in peace, at home and abroad, to safeguard our values and our way of life. We well remember.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, on October 22nd, 2014, a jihadist terrorist struck at the heart of our liberty, our democracy. Corporal Nathan Cirillo was brutally gunned down just a few steps from here. The incident took place just 2 days after the assassination of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent. Last year, the government honoured the sacrifice of these men, but this year the Liberals want Canadians to forget. There will not be a commemorative ceremony. Madam Speaker, why are the Liberals dishonouring these fallen men and trying to pretend that these jihadist attacks never happened? The Honourable Minister.
We respect the tremendous sacrifices that occurred with Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent and Corporal Nathan Cirillo, and they paid the ultimate sacrifice for our nation. It is events in Ottawa on November 11th and throughout the world where we pay tribute to those who have paid that ultimate sacrifice, to our Canadian Armed Force members and others who serve and secure this country daily. We will honour them, we will respect them, we understand their tremendous sacrifice of them and their families, and we will respect them going forward.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi James Nunavik-Kiyu. Madam Speaker, the situation in Muskrat Falls is escalating. In fact, the Nunatsiavut government is calling on the Prime Minister to immediately modify authorizations under the Fisheries Act to protect water and Aboriginal fishing zones. The government has stated that there is no relationship more important than one with First Nations, and I think it's time to take action, Madam Speaker. Will the government respect this simple ask from the government of Nunatsiavut and protect these waters? Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague opposite for his question. We acknowledge that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is working with Aboriginal peoples on this project. We want responsibilities to be respected to ensure that Aboriginal rights are protected. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Madam Speaker, after several missed opportunities, the government has an excellent opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. For decades, Quebecers and Canadians and people in my riding have been impatiently waiting for a dedicated passenger rail corridor, the Quebec-Windsor corridor. The Via Rail project calls for exactly that, and greenhouse gases would be reduced at the same time. Will the government respond to Via Rail's request and finally bring Canada into the 21st century? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government is developing the best approach to delivering a safe, efficient, and reliable passenger rail service in Canada. And as such, the Minister of Transport is working with VIA in the coming months to fully assess our options. And that is why in Budget 2016 we allocated $45 million to various VIA rail projects, including $34.4 million for the improvements of stations and maintenance centres, as well as $3.3 million over 3 years to support an in-depth assessment of VIA Rail's high-frequency rail proposal. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Madam Speaker, this government's paternal approach and top-down approach to financial transparency for First Nations must come to an end. They're not enforcing the Financial Transparency Act. They are breaking the law. The minister told the House on Monday that if band members want to know how their chief and council are spending the money, they just have to ask her office. Why are the Liberals forcing band members to go to a government department to receive information that should be readily available in the community?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for her question. As you know, accountability and transparency are key to our government and vital to ensuring that the delivery of investments in Indigenous and Northern communities through our Budget 2016. We're engaging with First Nations, as the Minister has said on many occasions, on a way forward on transparency and accountability. First Nations continue their long-standing practice of reporting on their financial and program performances, both to their members and to the department. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Madam Speaker, I think there's a reality check that's needed here. An audit of Alexander's First Nations identified $2.1 million in unexplained payments. As the former CFO said, you take those concerns to Indian Affairs. Indian Affairs says you have to go back to the Chief and Council. You bring it to the Chief and Council, and it gets swept under the rug. You go to the RCMP, they say you have to have proof, so they spin our people around. When will the Minister ensure that band members have access to basic financial information that all other Canadians enjoy?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone, including First Nations governments, want to ensure there's increased transparency and accountability. But we're going to achieve this by working in partnership with First Nations, not a top-down approach that's made in Ottawa. But what I will say is that we take the allegations of misuse of public funds very seriously. And when necessary, INAC conducts forensic audits to ensure that the funds are used for the intended manner. We treat the allegations of misused funds very seriously, and we will be following through to ensure that funds are invested properly.
For Foothills.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was surprised on Monday that the Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Indigenous and Northern Affairs said that she was committed to transparency and was willing to provide, and I quote, financial statements at any time. I was surprised by this because this is absolutely not the experience of local Alberta First Nations. So far, they have been ignored. On behalf of the Kainai Reserve, I have asked many times for the KPMG audit, which was completed last year, only to be stonewalled. When will this minister provide the Kainai Reserve with the financial audit, and what are they trying to hide?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the minister was very clear when she spoke to this issue a few days ago in the House of Commons. Financial transparency is important to us. Accountability is important to us. We know that changes have to be made in how that relationship works with First Nations. But again, it will not be a top-down approach from our government. It will be in working with the First Nations to get the process that will work best for everyone. In terms of the information, the minister has said it is available through her department. That remains the same, and I would ask those that are looking to
The Honourable Member for Longueuil, Charles Lemoine. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The situation is disastrous. We've all seen the pictures and the reports. Yesterday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs participated in a plenary session at the UN General Assembly initiated by Canada. Could he update this House on the discussions? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the Honourable Member. Yesterday, Canada mobilized the world through an exceptional procedure. It was a plenary meeting of the UN on this crisis. The international community spoke clearly. We need an end to hostilities and humanitarian assistance emergently, and this has been required since July. Assad, supported by Russia, must hear the message, stop the bombings, and allow humanitarian assistance to get through. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, a year after the election of the Liberal government, 3 years after the Lake Mégantic tragedy, every night the people of Lake Mégantic are jarred from their sleep by trains going right through their downtown core. The Standing Committee on Transport, the Leader of the Official Opposition, all people in the House, Union of Municipalities in Quebec, everybody agrees with the idea of a bypass for Lake Mégantic. Madam Speaker, the Minister said he was eager to hear the results of a study, a feasibility study on this, and people in Lake Mégantic are even more eager to hear. What's the Minister waiting for to take some action?
Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I mentioned, our thoughts continue to be with the families of the victims of the tragic events of July 2013. And our government is committed to improving rail safety. And in Budget 2016, we invested $143 million to improve rail safety and the transportation of dangerous goods. The members should note that the final results from the city-led study have not been released, and we are still awaiting the technical details. Therefore, the Minister would like to see the results before rendering a final decision, but we are conscious that the citizens of Lac Mégantic would like...
The honourable member for Kitchener.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this government believes that all Canadians deserve access to housing that meets their needs and that they can afford. With Budget 2016, this government has shown its will to renew Canada's leadership on housing. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development tell us how we are involved in this file internationally?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my hard-working colleague from Kitchener Centre for his excellent question. And I'm pleased to report the Minister of Social Development is leading the Canadian delegation in Quito, Ecuador, for the United Nations Habitat 3. We are there to ensure the new urban agenda is people-centric, respects diversity, and values the inclusion of unrepresented groups. Canada's new approach to housing is being applauded around the world, and we are so proud to be part of the international community at UN Habitat 3. Canada is back, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Yorkton-Melville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A disabled veteran contacted the Minister of Transport concerned about a rail crossing yards away from his home. Water floods the ditches, saturating the tracks during heavy rains. CN has said this is absolutely a safety concern as the tracks could shift and derail a train carrying oil through that city. The Minister's response? Contact your local MP. Seriously? When did he put me in charge of monitoring rail safety?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And our government recognizes the importance of ensuring the safety of our rail transportation system. And as such, we are investing $143 million in Budget 2016 to improve rail safety and the transportation of dangerous goods. There are positive developments in the mandate to enhance rail safety, and we will continue to improve rail safety. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Madam Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner denounced those evening fundraising events costing $1,500 a plate. It gives the impression, people the impression, that the government is for sale to the highest bidder, especially when it's the Minister of Finance. To restore public funding for political parties and to limit donations, they need to do what Quebec has done. When will the government put an end to these risks of cronyism and brown envelopes?
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we will abide by the exact same rules. Rules that were put in place by, in fact, the previous government. Rules that many members sitting on that side of the House used to fundraise for the Conservative Party, for example. I'd like to remind the members opposite, on May 19, 2015, former Finance Minister Joe Oliver held a fundraising at an elite private Albany club in Toronto. A special event with the Honourable Joe Oliver, PC MP, is how they advertise it, and they charge $500 a head. The point is, Madam Speaker, we are following the law of Elections Canada.
The honourable member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, in Quebec, the separation of the state and church is a consensus, but not here. This week, the Caliph Mahmad came in and the non-Muslim liberals wore the veil. We had a call to prayer in Centre Block. In Quebec, it is a secular place, not here. We call for the separation of state and church, and please affirm once and for all the secular nature of all institutions, starting with this Parliament. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, our government wants to defend the rights and freedoms covered by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We respect the rights of people, the rights to their faith, and we support multiculturalism in our country. We respect the laws and rights of all Canadians in this House and across the country. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Madam Speaker. On many occasions, the Prime Minister has stated that social acceptability is required for Energy East. However, social acceptability doesn't come from the National Energy Board. It comes from the people. The people, Madam Speaker. The NEB shouldn't be telling us what to do. And people are saying no to Energy East. On Tuesday, Gatineau spoke out against the Energy East pipeline. So 75% of Quebec's largest cities have officially rejected it. What will it take for the government to understand that Quebecers don't want Energy East? They don't want it.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, every once in a while, the member rises in her place and wants to decide herself what the government should do about a project that's currently in front of the regulator. The National Energy Board will look at evidence, and I'm sure would be very pleased to consider what the honourable member has to say. But for the government to respond to that question and kill a project that has not yet been considered would be irresponsible.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canadian health transfers provide long-term predictable funding for provinces and territories and are meant to ensure the universality and accessibility of health care for all Canadians. However, the per capita allocation of this funding does not account for Nunavut's unique regional and infrastructural realities, making it completely inadequate. Will the Minister of Health commit to addressing this inadequacy and adjust this dated system to ensure that Nunavut Mute have the same level of service that all other Canadians enjoy? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I thank the member from Nunavut for the question. I had the opportunity to speak to the territorial health ministers this week, and we discussed the unique circumstances in the territories and the challenges of delivering care. We will, of course, continue with the Canada Health Transfer to support the territories. In addition, there is a territorial formula financing to the tune of $1.5 billion, which goes to Nunavut each year and which helps to facilitate the expenses in health. In addition to that, there is a territorial health investment fund in the order of $60 million. We're very pleased to make sure that people in the territories, including Nunavut, get the care that they need.
Étant donné que c'est la fin de la période de...
It now being the end of question period.
We'll be returning to routine proceedings.
Documents. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to table a document from the Council of Canadians of Winnipeg, which was created in support of the reinstatement and the enhancement of the Navigable Waters Act. In order to protect rivers, the 99% of rivers, like the Bloodbane River in Manitoba, which have no protection.
Does the member have unanimous consent to table the documents? There's no unanimous consent. Tabling of documents. Dépôt de documents. Introduction of government bills. Ms. Wilson-Raybould, seconded by Mrs. Philpott, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Criminal Code. This motion, victim surcharge. This motion is deemed adopted. Ms. Wilson-Raybould, seconded by Mrs. Philpott, moves that the bill be now read a first time